XML. I'm the marketing specialist here at Jet Systems, and welcome to today's webinar, Storage Options for XML Content, presented by Selenium Young Solutions Consulting. So before we get started, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items. We are recording today's webinar, and we'll be sending out the link to everybody in a follow-up email after the event. We are also taking questions, so if you have any, you can submit them using the Q&A panel on the right side of the interface, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll pass it over to Selene.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. So today is, again, a quick talk, and we'll be looking at the topic of how to store your XML content. So, of course, we're coming at it from the perspective of XML. XMetal is an XML authoring tool. You're going to be, the tools for writing the content, and then people are always asking us, okay, well, where do I put it now? How can I find it again? Okay. So a couple more housekeeping things. Today's slides, Dave mentioned this webinar will be recorded. Now today's slides are also going to be available at a website called slideshare.net. Actually, they've already been uploaded, so if you go to this URL here at any time, you'll be able to see and download the slides. So I'd like to start with these, we've got these webinars on twice a month. And I would like to start with a little bit of what's new, so a couple of quick things. One is that we've released XMetal Author in Japanese. We're very happy about that. And another thing some of you might be interested in is that if you're interested in collaborative online reviewing, our XMetal Reviewer server-based product is available at promotional pricing when packaged with XMetal Author just until the end of this year. So with that, let's go into what we came here to look at today. So the issue of content storage for XML, content storage is very straightforward if you're using computers kind of the way that they were originally designed for, which is, with this idea of one person sitting down at one machine and saving to that machine and coming back the next day, and it's just that one person. As soon as you're in a team environment and you've got people sharing files and you're also trying to make your system more robust, you want to have some kind of backup, you want to have some kind of way of recovering from errors, that's when things start to become complicated. So things do get complicated quite quickly as soon as you're in a team setting. So today we're going to try to untangle some of that. XMetal, where we're coming from as XMetal solution providers, we sell just the authoring tool ourselves. We refer to ourselves as CMS agnostic. In other words, we work with a wide variety of content management systems. We don't sell any particular content management system. So we're not here to promote a particular favorite option for you. We're basically happy with whatever makes our customers happy. So what we're trying to do in today's event is just offer you some insights and some of our experience so that you're more likely to be happy with whatever you choose. And today, in just this brief kind of general overview, we're not going to be able to you're probably not going to get away from this knowing, okay, this is exactly what I need. What we can kind of do is kind of peel off a layer, give you a framework for evaluating things. And because content storage is such a complicated system for actually making a decision for yourself, or helping you make a decision, I should say. So let's start by looking at what people want in content storage in a team environment. So there are really two major sets of features that are probably the most critical things. One in a team environment is the system going to help you with the risk of edit conflict? In other words, everybody is rightfully concerned about the possibility that two people will have a file open and they'll branch the file, or they'll try to make conflicting saves to it, or even somebody who didn't make any changes is prompted to save when they close the file and then overwrite changes that are made by another person. So So in a team environment, any team environment, one of the common requirements is to deal with edit conflicts. And the second major requirement is what's called version history. So if you have been working on a document for some time and then you screw it up, or more likely your coworker screws it up, can you get back to what you were working on yesterday, or can you get back to what you were working on an hour ago? And that's something that is not as difficult as it sounds. The technology for doing this kind of thing is quite widely available. So that's a requirement that definitely is worth considering. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're working with XML is that XML documents are almost always made up of many different files. Your images are going to be in a separate files from your text. Often you're dealing with components of content, and so you're going to have links in between your documents. And your links almost always include file names and folder names, folder paths. Okay, so if you just save a new copy of your file under a new file name, it probably will break the link if that's all you're doing. So what people want in the system is to have a versioning model that's compatible with linking, and it's not going to break the link. So those are the two main requirements that we'll be looking at today, because they're so fundamental. And finally, the third thing that we'll be looking at is what is the cost of these systems. So it's a very high-level overview, just looking at the basics. And we'll be looking at comparatively 5 different options today. The first one is kind of the status quo if you don't do anything, which is just, saving files to a local machine or to a shared drive. Then we'll be looking at a technology or a protocol called WebDAV and see what that can do for you. We'll be looking at that also has some really interesting features for content storage. And then we'll be looking at the options for content management systems. So we won't be comparing content management systems today. What we'll be looking at more is, what can you do with a content management system compared to the other options that are not content management systems. And we're going to be making a distinction between a content management system which has a dedicated bridge to talk to XMetal and a content management system which doesn't. And just try to make some generalizations about things. Okay. So to start off, let's look at the status quo, if you aren't doing anything. And we'll just call this the Windows file system. Could be your local machine, could be a network share that multiple people are using. So the main advantage of the Windows file system is that it's you don't have to pay to use it. It's on your computer already. And you don't have to set it up. But there are a couple of really big drawbacks to this. One of them is edit conflicts. So if you have multiple people who are all sharing, who are all able to open and edit documents that are on a shared drive, you're quite likely to have some kind of problem at some time. One thing to keep in mind is that if you're just using the file system, XMetal doesn't lock files. So if you open a file and then someone else opens that file, neither one of you is going to get any kind of feedback that there are two people editing that file. And there's no version history. So with a Windows file system, it's up to you to make backups, and often people will do a save as and name their file with a new name so that they've got their old yesterday's copy plus today's copy. But that's not very compatible with XML linking. Okay, so Windows file system is kind of our baseline to look at what the issues are. One of the things that we want to talk about today is what the different options, what kinds of teams the different options are useful for. The Windows file system by itself is possibly okay if you've got just one person working, but as soon as you're in a team environment, most people will want to get off it basically as soon as possible. Okay. So that's our baseline, and let's look at something that's one level up from that, and that's using a technology called WebDAV. So WebDAV is not a I call it a technology, but it's not really a technology, it's a protocol. It's not a particular application, it's a kind of more like a standard to which different applications are compliant. So it's just a way that, or a set of methods that computers can use to talk to each other. The origins of WebDAV were really just, when the World Wide Web came out, WebDAV was developed as a way for people to write to web servers as well. And WebDAV stands for Web-Based Distributed Authoring and Versioning, but this is a bit of a misnomer because in the history of WebDAV, what happened was that they got as far as the distributed authoring part, and they didn't get to versioning. Okay, so WebDAV by itself doesn't have any kind of standardization for how versioning works. Okay, and that leads us into the limitations of WebDAV. So WebDAV, so that if a second person opens the file, they're not going to get, they're going to get an error message if they try to save the file. Okay, so notice that it doesn't necessarily give you a notification when you open the file that someone else already has it open and is working with it. You're only going to get this error message if you try to save. And when you, as soon as you close the file, this lock is going to be released. So that's how WebDAV is implemented in XMetal. If you're just using the Windows file system with WebDAV, then one thing to really keep in mind is that there isn't going to be any kind of version history. Okay, so if you screw up the file, you've screwed up your file. If you've got if you've run a nightly backup or something, you can look at yesterday's backup. That that means looking at old tapes, and it's a bit of a pain to try to retrieve a version history. But it's also not difficult to implement. It's free, so it does have some merits that will give you something a little bit more than what the file system does. So how it works is that on your shared drive on your server, you need to install some web server software to basically make that server function as a web server. And you would designate the folder that contains your XML content as being a WebDAV folder. And at that point, the server side of things is going to have some WebDAV smarts. XMetal requires that on your local machine you map the WebDAV folder to a drive letter, okay? And in Windows has kind of varying support for WebDAV. There's a few holes in Windows support, especially earlier versions of Windows. You can set up WebDAV directly in Windows, but we also hear that this product called WebDrive gives people some better results for some certain cases. If you do want to use the just Windows drive mapping, what you can do is right-click this My Computer icon and put a URL in here to map that URL to a drive letter. And at that point, whatever drive letter you set up is going to be something that you can browse to, just as if it was a folder on your local hard drive. Okay, so you can open documents, you can make links to your documents, pretty much as if it was a local folder. And WebDAV just gives you access to those folders, but with locking. So in terms of which kinds of teams this is suitable for, again, another big minus for WebDAV is that XMetal Author Enterprise, even though XMetal Author Enterprise itself works well with WebDAV, there are some third-party components that are integrated into XML systems which are not WebDAV compliant. So, for example, the Data Open Toolkit doesn't work over WebDAV. It doesn't work on HTTP servers. So, because data functionality in XMetal uses third-party components that are not WebDAV compatible, we don't support the use of WebDAV with data documents. Okay, so for these big reasons, WebDAV is not a popular option. It's one of those things that sounds better than it really is. So let's look at something that we think of as being underrated. This is a technology called Subversion, and this actually is a pretty cool way of going about things. So Subversion is a technology. It's a set of applications, and it's open source and it's free. So basically the way it works is that you've got the Subversion server-side components that you install on a server, and then there are a variety of client-side applications that you would use on each writer's local machine. One that a lot of people like and that we've used a lot is what's called TortoiseSVN. And this is just another open source application. If you do a Google search for TortoiseSVN, you'll be able to download it. It's totally free. It's easy to install. And what happens is that you use this TortoiseSVN application to copy folders or files from the server to your local machine. You only copy the folders or files that you need to work on. And all the handling of edit conflicts and versioning is done when you use this TortoiseSVN application again to copy files back to the server. Okay? So you're always working with your local machine when you're working on documents, but it's the copying back and forth that is handled by some pretty cool technology. So the way that it works is that when you copy files back to Subversion, you're alerted if someone else has made changes to that file, and you're given the option to merge files. Okay, and merging is tricky in some ways, but for XML files it should work better than for many other types of files because XML files are just text. Version history is kept. Linking will continue to work because linking, you're making links on your local machine, and those will just be always point to the latest version of the file, and the file name is always the same, even though there's multiple versions. Okay, so edit conflicts and versioning are handled in a fairly robust way if you understand the model. Subversion is free. One of the, I'd say probably the main drawback of Subversion is that you do have to download whole folders and whole files to your local machine. One of the things this means is that if you're making a reference, if you're making a link from one file to the other, that you need to have the full, all of the folders which constitute the folder path in between, in between your document and in between those two documents. So if you've got, say, a topic file and you're including an image file into that topic, you need to download the pair. That can be an issue. Or if you've got, really sprawling, complicated folder structure, that can be an issue. So with this TortoiseSVN application, what it does is it kind of gives you an extension to Windows, so you can see these icons, which tell you kind of a bit more about the state of these documents in Subversion. XMetal has, kind of hooks into the local file system in various ways, hooks into Windows in various ways. One of them is this resource manager pane. And you can see that if you have TortoiseSVN installed, all of that functionality is going to be available right from within XMetal. The way that TortoiseSVN works is that a lot of features are available through right-click. So even though I'm working within XMetal, I can still right-click these icons and I can get all of this, revision control functionality directly from within XMetal. So Subversion is an option that we think a lot more teams could probably be happy with. So far from the teams that we know of that are using Subversion or that have been using Subversion, people seem to be very relatively happy with it. So it's basically for people who don't, for some reason or other, need a content management system. They just need that edit conflict handling, and they just need versioning, and they don't have complex folder structures. Okay, so for those types of teams, which are generally smaller teams, people are generally quite happy with Subversion. So let's move up one level from, this kind of small team, small content scenario and look at content management systems. So there's a lot of different content management systems out there. Just a very brief, high-level and partial overview of the kinds of things that you can get in a content management system that you wouldn't get anywhere else. All content management systems that you use for enterprise documents are going to have, some ability to check in and check out files. In other words, it's going to lock a file if somebody asks to check it out, and it's going to keep that file checked out for as long as that person wants it. So content management systems are good at having a robust check-in, check-out kind of feature. But basically, all content management systems will give you some kind of version history. And most content management systems are going to be better than anything else at having features such as workflow, being able to push a task at somebody. Here you need to fill in this document, you need to edit this document, or you need to review this document, and have documents move around in an organization. So people often want a CMS if they need workflow. Okay? People often need a CMS if they need search, especially for images, where any kind of file system model is going to be quite limited when it comes to searching for images. Content management systems are generally better at kind of handling the metadata that you need for really good search. Content management systems often have more sophisticated security and authentication features that are useful for some organizations. They often have features that are helpful if you're localizing your content and being able to keep track of what's been localized. And they also often have features for managing the publishing side of things, so actually delivering content. So these are the kinds of things that people want to consider a content management system. Now, when people work with a content management system and an authoring tool, they're often looking for an integrated experience. They don't want people to have to, shuffle files around between the CMS and authoring tool a lot, because that takes up a lot of time and is kind of error prone. So there are technologies which are known as a bridge between a CMS and an authoring tool. You may often have heard of a bridge also referred to as a connector or an adapter or simply an integration between a given CMS and a given authoring tool such as XMetal. So what a bridge does is that it's a piece of technology which lets the authoring tool read and write to the content management system repository instead of just writing to a file system. Okay, and it's not just blindly putting in data into the CMS. It's not just overwriting a file that's already in the CMS. It's engineered to work with the version history features of the CMS. Okay, so that when the authoring tool writes to the CMS, it's done in a way that results in a new version. Often there's going to be a prompt in the authoring tool asking you for comments, asking you if you want to make this a major or minor version. So versioning is going to be more fully featured in a content management system, and the authoring tool should be able to talk to that. Okay, so it's going to work with your whatever security and version management features you have in your content management system. And it also works with the search feature of the content management system as well, I should say. So a CMS bridge is a particular piece of technology, and it's going to be either sold or supported by a particular CMS vendor or by an authoring tool vendor. So notice that this is going to work with a particular, a bridge is going to work between a particular CMS type and a particular authoring tool type. And it's also going to be version specific. So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but it is something that can give you more functionality and more smoothness and more foolproofness because it's engineered to be specific. So when you've got a bridge between a CMS and XMetal, you can do things like bring dialog boxes from the content management system directly into XMetal. So if I, for example, want to see the properties of a dialog box, or I want to edit, view some metadata associated with that, with a piece of content, I can ask for it directly from XMetal, and the CMS will bring it, will show it in its own UI. The other thing that I can do with a bridge, depending on which type of bridge it is that I can bring in a search dialog. So if I'm looking for, say, if I have thousands of image files and I'm looking to, I'm looking for a particular image that has particular keywords associated with it, I can ask for an image which is associated with certain keywords, do that search, and then choose that image file and insert it directly into XMetal. Okay, so you're going to have a much more functional and tight integration if you have a CMS bridge. On our XMetal community forums, which is forums.xmetal.com, we have a partial list of content management systems that have a bridge with XMetal. And as of right now, there are 18 of them, and there are probably some more out there that we haven't put on the list yet, or we don't know about. So if you're interested in in finding a CMS that works well with XMetal, this list is a really good place to start. So let's summarize some of the features of having a CMS with a dedicated bridge. Okay, this, by the way, is a menu that is within XMetal. You can see the integrated check-in and check-out and document creation options directly within XMetal. So the features of this are going to be edit conflict handling is going to be very good. The CMS is going to let you check out a file. XMetal is going to know that it's checked out, and it's going to be able to give good feedback when you've got when someone else has that file open. In general, if someone else has a file open, one thing that XMetal would do is it would tell you, okay, someone else has this file open. Do you want to open it view only instead, so that you don't waste your time making updates to a file that someone else is already working on. Okay. Version history is going to be kept. It's going to be robust, and it's going to be compatible with linking. In general, links are going to refer to the latest version of a file. So if you check in a new version of a file, you usually want to link to that one, older version of the file. And in some content management systems, you can do that. So the main disadvantage of using a CMS with a dedicated bridge is that it's more expensive in general than using Subversion or using nothing at all. The cost, there is a very wide range of costs available. It can range from a few $100s a month for a software as a service kind of thing. I think there's at least one open source data CMS that's out there. That's very new. And then there are things go up from there in terms of more features, more history, and higher costs. So a CMS with a dedicated bridge is one of the things that XMetal customers, one of the reasons I would say that people choose XMetal, because XMetal gives you so many options for integrating mobile content management systems. So we estimate that probably about half of XMetal customers are using this option, and that's especially skewed towards the bigger teams. So the more people you have on your team and the more content that you have, the more important it is that you have a fully featured content management system and a good integration with the authoring tool. So let's look now at one last option for completeness. So we saw how there were over a dozen options for using XMetal with a content management system via a dedicated bridge that's going to be specifically designed to connect these two products. It is possible, so there's more than 18 content management systems out there. You may be interested in working with a content management system which doesn't have a bridge, to XMetal. So let's look at what's involved there. There are basically two ways of working with a content management system if you don't have a dedicated bridge. So the first one is just using your local file system, in other words, using your local machine as a sandbox kind of area for files. So what you would do then is, go to the web interface for your CMS, or you go to the, some other client to access your CMS, check out a file and download it to your local file system. So in other words, check out a file, put it on your desktop or in a temporary file directory or something like that. And then you would edit that file, and then you would upload it back to the content management system when you're done. Okay? So this is going to be cumbersome, and it's especially going to be cumbersome or even maybe impossible if you're trying to create links between files, because when you create links between files, you want to create them directly on your, directly to where it is in the repository, not to where that target file happens to be in your local file system. Okay. So this is a really awkward or, sometimes unworkable way of doing it. Okay. It will mean that when something's checked out, it's properly checked out, and versioning is also going to be handled as well. But it's not a great way of working with things. The other thing that we can do if you don't have a CMS is you can access the CMS via WebDAV. Okay, so we looked at WebDAV earlier in terms of working with documents in a local file system. You can, with some content management systems, access the folder structure. But remember, one thing to really keep in mind is that WebDAV as a protocol isn't really designed as a way of talking to content management systems. It's designed as a way of talking to web servers. Okay, so a web server can act, a content management system can act as a web server, but if what you want as a web server, you wouldn't buy a CMS. You would buy, you would buy a web server, which would be a lot cheaper than a CMS. So it's not necessarily going to play well. WebDAV isn't going to necessarily give you a way to play well with the features of your CMS. So handling of edit conflicts and versioning, it's going to vary a lot, and basically it's one of those things that makes people kind of queasy. You need to really wonder if when you edit a file, is it going to create a new version? Is it going to give you? Is it going to check out that file to you? Is it going to authenticate people properly? And these, the answers to these questions are going to vary according to your CMS. We've also heard from CMS vendors that they just find that WebDAV has a lot of issues in terms of security, in terms of working really well. So the idea of accessing a CMS via WebDAV, it sounds good. You don't have to worry about having this, bridge which will only talk to specific versions. But it's also going to give you a much less robust solution. And it doesn't really save you any money either. CMSs that have a dedicated bridge to XMetal, there's a nice range of choices, and CMSs that don't have that bridge are, cost about the same. But if you do need to use a particular CMS for some reason or other, and it doesn't have a dedicated bridge, this is what you would probably use. You need to do more testing and ask more questions to make sure that versioning and locking are working. And again, because of those third-party components that XMetal uses for its data features, it's not recommended for data users. Okay, so I would say that probably very few XMetal customers are using connecting to a CMS via WebDAV. That's our guess. I mean, we don't have really exhaustive data on it, but from the support team, that seems to be the summary. All of these options that we've looked at, we've looked at 5 options, and they're all good for different groups. There's always it's always the right option for somebody. But if we had to pick, what we think are the ones that people are most likely to be happy with, in general, we think that people are most likely to be happy with a content management system with a dedicated XMetal bridge. For the groups where they don't need any of the content management system features, they just need some basic versioning. They just need to make sure that you don't have people overwriting each other's changes blindly. Then we encourage use of Subversion with TortoiseSVN, and that's free or cheap to use. Okay, so those are the 2 that we tend to recommend the most. Obviously, mileage varies for different people. So that's basically what we wanted to talk about today. We're going to move into Q&A soon, twice a month. They're usually on Thursdays. For 2 weeks from now, we've got some scheduling conflicts on the Thursday. So the next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, October 19th. Okay, and with that, just going to move into Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. So we have a couple of questions right now. First question is, for us, what we missed in Subversion?
Okay, I see. So this is just someone who's just giving us some feedback on Subversion. There's a couple of good points here about features that you don't get in Subversion. One of them is a list of broken links, and another one is a list of documents or images that are not used anywhere. So those are a couple of good points. And there are a couple other questions here.
So the next question is, do you have any experience with customers who are using Perforce to store files? Or how about SharePoint? Any experience, knowledge there?
We do have customers who are using Perforce, I believe. I just don't happen to know the details of that, but it can work. Basically, there's no direct integration between XMetal and Perforce that I know of. So you would be checking out a file from Perforce and, basically using it as your local file system as a sandbox, working on it with XMetal and checking it back in. For SharePoint, there are a few different options. We do have quite a few customers, I think, using SharePoint in some way or another. There's a dedicated connector to SharePoint. In other words, there's a dedicated XMetal bridge between XMetal and SharePoint. So that is how we would generally recommend that people work with SharePoint, is working with SharePoint as a content management system with a bridge.
There are shell extensions for Perforce.
Okay. Okay. If you want to, thank you. That was my coworker, Tom. Okay, can you elaborate on that?
No elaboration necessary, but I don't know if you could hear me over the phone. I was just saying that there are shell extensions available for Perforce, and so you ought to be able to use those shell extensions in the same way that you can use TortoiseSVN that Elaine mentioned with Subversion.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Tom. 12? About there are a company called Suite Solutions has built kind of a more extensive content management system based on SharePoint, and that's intriguing as well. One thing to mention about SharePoint is that it looks free, but it isn't. Not everybody who uses SharePoint finds it as low cost as they think it's going to be. Okay.
So next question. Can a real-time user interface call be made directly to a data file stored in Subversion?
A real-time user interface call directly to a data file stored in Subversion. not sure what a user interface call would be. Maybe the person who asked this question can just send us another question with a clarification. But when you're working with Subversion, you're always working with a local copy of your files. So basically anything that you can do with the local file system, you can also do with files that are going to be checked into Subversion. Okay. So the answer is, if it can be done at all, it can be done with files that are going to later be checked into Subversion.
Okay, so next question. What about link management when topic IDs and element IDs change? Can a dedicated bit of CMS update links and files checked out?
I don't know. That's a good question. So basically the background to this is that links between files often refer to a particular file name, and they also tend to refer to an ID, which is a piece of which is a string that's within the topic itself, within the document itself. And the question is whether links can be updated if these IDs change. I'd say that probably not all content management systems can handle that scenario. Generally, the expectation is that topic IDs and element IDs should not change. One of the things that XMetal does is it will give you a very long string, like it will automatically generate a very long, what's apparently a string of random numbers as element IDs. They're not pretty, but they have the value of being unique. So these long random strings that you see as element IDs, XMetal generates them because we know that once they're generated, they're not going to have to change, because changing topic IDs and element IDs is difficult to support in terms of link management. Okay, and I think that's all the questions that we've got time for today.
And for any other questions we can get to, we'll maybe answer them offline before I ask them, and we'll get back to you that way. So that's the 45 minutes right now. Thanks again to Wayne for doing the presentation, and thank you to everyone else that attended, and I guess we'll see you at the next event.
Thanks, everyone.